The November wind cut through Manhattan like a blade, merciless and cold. Ethan Rivers pulled his worn jacket tighter around his thin frame, the fabric doing little to shield him from the biting chill that swept down Fifth Avenue. At 16, he'd learned that survival on these streets required more than just endurance. It required invisibility, the kind that let you blend into doorways and subway entrances, becoming just another shadow in a city that had millions of them. His spot today was outside Bergdorf Goodman, where the wealthy emerged with shopping bags worth more than most people earned in a month. Ethan had positioned himself carefully, close enough to be seen, far enough not to be threatening. His cardboard sign, weathered and bent at the corners, read simply, "Hungry. Anything helps. God bless." It was almost noon when he saw her. She moved differently than the others. While most people walked with purpose, phones pressed to their ears or eyes fixed straight ahead in practiced urban avoidance, this woman moved with a deliberate awareness. She was elegant, probably in her late 30s, with auburn hair pulled back in a classic style that spoke of old money rather than new wealth. Her coat was camel-colored cashmere, and even from a distance Ethan could tell it cost more than he'd seen in 6 months. But it wasn't her appearance that caught his attention. It was the way her eyes moved, constantly scanning, reading the world in a way that felt familiar to him. She was watching people's faces, their gestures, their body language with an intensity that went beyond simple observation. She was deaf. Ethan knew it instantly. He'd learned to recognize the signs years ago, in what felt like another lifetime entirely. The woman paused near the corner, waiting for the light to change. A businessman bumped into her from behind, muttering an apology she couldn't hear. She turned, her expression patient but distant, and Ethan saw the exact moment the man realized she hadn't heard him. The businessman's face shifted through embarrassment to awkward frustration before he hurried away. Ethan watched as the woman's shoulders tensed slightly, a small moment of isolation in a sea of people. Something in his chest tightened. He knew that feeling too well. Before he could second-guess himself, Ethan stood up, leaving his cardboard sign and his battered backpack behind. He moved through the sidewalk crowd with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent 2 years learning every rhythm of these streets. As he approached, the woman had just received her coffee from a street vendor, fumbling slightly with her purse while trying to hold the cup. Ethan positioned himself in her line of sight and raised his hands. "Do you need help?" He signed, his fingers forming the ASL with fluid precision. The woman's eyes widened in surprise. For a moment, she simply stared at him. This teenage boy in threadbare clothes and scuffed sneakers, standing before her on a Manhattan sidewalk speaking her language. Then her face transformed. The guarded expression melted into something warmer, more human. A genuine smile touched her lips. "You sign?" she responded, her hands moving with the elegance that matched everything else about her. "Yes," Ethan signed back. "I learned when I was younger." "That's wonderful. Thank you for offering, but I'm okay." She paused, studying his face with an intensity that made him want to look away. "What's your name?" "Ethan." He hesitated, then added, "Ethan Rivers." "I'm Victoria." She shifted her coffee to one hand to sign more freely. It's rare to meet someone who signs, especially out here. They stood there in the middle of the sidewalk, an island of silent conversation while the city roared around them. People flowed past, oblivious to the connection forming between them. Ethan found himself relaxing slightly. Victoria's presence had a calming quality, something genuine in a world that felt increasingly artificial. "Are you from New York?" she asked. "Born here," Ethan signed, which was true enough. "You?" "Originally from Connecticut. I've lived in the city for 15 years now." Victoria's expression shifted, becoming more observant. "Forgive me for being direct, but are you homeless, Ethan?" The question should have stung, but something about the way she asked it, with genuine concern rather than judgment, made it bearable. Ethan nodded slowly. "For about 2 years now." Victoria's face fell. "I'm so sorry. That must be incredibly difficult, especially at your age." "I manage," Ethan signed, trying to inject confidence he didn't entirely feel. "The streets teach you things. You learn fast or you don't make it." "How did you learn sign language?" Victoria asked. "It's not common knowledge." Ethan felt his chest tighten. This was always the dangerous part, when people started asking questions that led to answers he couldn't give. The truth was a labyrinth that led straight to Marcus Vance, and that was a path Ethan couldn't afford to walk down. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "My mother," he signed finally, choosing a version of the truth that wouldn't expose too much. "She was deaf. She taught me when I was little." "Was?" Victoria's hands moved gently, acknowledging the past tense. She died when I was 14. Another truth, though the circumstances around her death were far more complicated than those simple words suggested. Victoria's expression softened with sympathy. I'm very sorry, Ethan. Losing a parent that young, I can't imagine. They stood in silence for a moment, the conversation pausing as a delivery truck rumbled past, its engine drowning out the ambient city noise. When it passed, Victoria looked at her watch, an elegant piece that probably cost more than everything Ethan owned combined, and then back at him. I need to go, she signed. But I'd like to help you if you'll let me. Would you accept some money for food? Ethan hesitated. Pride warred with practicality in his chest. He'd learned early that accepting help often came with strings attached, invisible obligations that could trap you. But Victoria's offer felt different somehow, cleaner. I would appreciate that, he signed. Thank you. Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out her wallet. She extracted several bills. Ethan caught sight of at least 3 20s and held them out. But as Ethan reached for the money, a voice cut through the space between them. Victoria! The voice was male, commanding, used to being obeyed. Ethan turned to see a man approaching them with long, purposeful strides. He was probably in his mid-40s, wearing a suit that screamed wealth and power, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes, perfectly tailored to his athletic frame. His dark hair was graying at the temples in that distinguished way that seemed calculated, and his jaw was set in an expression that bordered on hostile. Nathan Ashford. Ethan recognized him instantly, though they'd never met. He'd seen this face in newspapers, on television, in the business magazines that people left behind in subway cars. One of New York's most prominent billionaires, founder of Ashford Technologies, a man whose net worth was estimated in the billions. Ethan's biological father. The knowledge sat in his chest like a stone, heavy and cold. Nathan Ashford had no idea that the homeless teenager standing before his wife was his son. The son he'd never known existed, stolen from him 16 years ago by a man Nathan had once called his closest friend. Nathan reached them, his eyes immediately locking onto Ethan with undisguised suspicion. Is everything all right here? He asked, his tone making it clear he didn't think it was. Victoria turned to her husband and Ethan watched as she spoke. Her voice had that particular quality of people who'd learned to speak before losing their hearing. Slightly flat, but perfectly intelligible. Nathan, this is Ethan. He signs. We were just talking. Nathan's expression didn't soften. His gaze swept over Ethan, taking in the worn clothes, the dirt under his fingernails, the hollow look that came from too many nights sleeping rough. Ethan could practically see the man's mind working, categorizing him, dismissing him. I see, Nathan said, his voice carefully neutral. He looked at Victoria. We're running late for lunch. I was just giving him some money for food, Victoria said, still holding out the bills. How charitable, Nathan replied, the words edged with something sharp. He pulled out his own wallet, extracted a $100 bill with practiced ease, and held it out to Ethan. Here, buy yourself a meal, self-adani. The gesture was meant to end the encounter, to purchase Ethan's departure. It was charity in its coldest form, money as dismissal rather than genuine care. Ethan looked at the bill, then at Nathan's face, and felt something surge inside him. Anger, yes, but also a desperate, aching sadness. This man, his father, was looking at him like he was nothing more than an inconvenience. He took the money, his fingers briefly touching Nathan's, and for just a moment, Ethan let himself imagine a different world, one where Nathan knew the truth, where this encounter was a reunion rather than a transaction between stranger and benefactor. Thank you, Ethan signed to Victoria, deliberately excluding Nathan from the conversation. You're very kind. Victoria smiled warmly. Take care of yourself, Ethan. Stay warm out here. Nathan had already taken Victoria's arm, gently but firmly, starting to guide her away. But before they'd gone more than a few steps, Victoria turned back. Do you come to this area often? She signed. Ethan nodded. Most days it's a good spot. Then perhaps I'll see you again. Nathan noticed Victoria had stopped and turned back, his expression darkening with impatience. He said something to her that Ethan couldn't hear, but whatever it was made Victoria nod and finally turn away. Ethan watched them disappear into the crowd, Nathan's protective hand on Victoria's back, the two of them moving in the synchronized way of couples who'd been together for years. He stood there, the $100 bill crumpled in his fist, feeling the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on his chest. A gust of wind swept down the avenue, carrying with it the smell of roasted nuts from a street vendor and exhaust from the endless stream of traffic. Ethan shivered and made his way back to his spot, where his sign and backpack waited undisturbed. A small miracle in this city. He sat down heavily, his back against the cold stone of the building, and stared at the money in his hand. $100. It would buy him food for a week, maybe more if he was careful. It would mean not having to choose between eating and finding a warm place to sleep. It was more money than he'd seen in months, but it felt like blood money. Payment for staying away, for remaining invisible, for not being who he really was. Ethan closed his eyes and let his head fall back against the wall. His mind drifted back 2 years, to the night everything changed, to Marcus Vance's face, twisted with rage and something worse, fear, to the documents Ethan had found hidden in Marcus's office, birth certificates and adoption papers with names that didn't match, dates that told a story of theft and lies. "If you ever tell anyone," Marcus had hissed, his hands tight on Ethan's shoulders, shaking him hard enough to make his teeth rattle, "I will destroy you. I will destroy any life you try to build. You understand me? You're nothing without me. You've always been nothing." And then the streets, cold and endless. 2 years of surviving, of learning that the world was far less forgiving than he'd ever imagined. 2 years of watching Nathan Ashford from a distance, seeing the life that should have been his, the penthouses, the charity galas, the empire built on technology and innovation. 2 years of waiting for the right moment, though he'd never been sure what that moment would look like. Until today, until Victoria. Ethan opened his eyes and looked down Fifth Avenue, where somewhere in the distance his father was having lunch with his wife, completely unaware that his son was alive, was struggling, was so close he could have reached out and touched him. The question that had haunted Ethan for 2 years crystallized in his mind with new urgency. What exactly did he want from Nathan Ashford? Justice? Revenge? Recognition? Family? He didn't know. But for the first time since Marcus had thrown him out, Ethan felt like he might actually have a chance to find out. The wind picked up again, and Ethan tucked the $100 bill safely into his jacket pocket. Tomorrow, he decided, he would be here again, and the day after that. As many days as it took for Victoria to return, for another chance at the connection he'd felt in those few minutes of silent conversation. Because Victoria had seen him, truly seen him in a way no one else had in 2 years. And maybe, just maybe, she could be the bridge to the father who didn't even know he existed. 3 days passed before Victoria returned. Ethan had spent every daylight hour at his usual spot outside Bergdorf Goodman, watching the endless parade of wealthy shoppers with a patience born of desperation. The $100 Nathan had given him was already half gone. Food was expensive in Manhattan, even the cheap kind, and the temperature had dropped enough that Ethan had been forced to spend 2 nights in a hostel rather than risk hypothermia sleeping rough. Each morning he'd positioned himself carefully, making sure he was visible but not conspicuous. He'd learned the rhythm of the street, the patterns of security guards and beat cops who might move him along. He'd become a fixture, just another piece of the urban landscape that people could choose to see or ignore. And then, on the 3rd day, he saw her. Victoria emerged from a black Mercedes that pulled smoothly to the curb. She was alone this time, no Nathan hovering protectively at her side. She wore a different coat today, navy blue with gold buttons, and carried a leather handbag that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. But it was her face that caught Ethan's attention. There was a purposefulness to her expression, a determination that suggested this wasn't a random shopping trip. She was looking for him. Ethan's heart began to pound. He stood up slowly, brushing off his jeans with hands that trembled slightly. This was it. Another chance. Maybe his only real chance to move closer to the truth he'd been chasing for 2 years. Victoria spotted him almost immediately. Her face lit up with genuine pleasure, and she made her way directly to him, navigating the sidewalk traffic with practiced ease. "Ethan," she signed as she approached. "I was hoping you'd be here." "Victoria," he signed back, trying to keep his hands steady. "It's good to see you again. How have you been? Have you been eating?" Her concern seemed genuine, written in every line of her face. "Yes, thank you. Your husband's generosity helped a lot." Ethan hesitated, then added, "Though I got the feeling he wasn't happy about our conversation." Victoria's expression shifted, something complicated passing across her features. Acknowledgement, perhaps, or mild embarrassment. "Nathan means well. He's just protective. He worries about me talking to strangers." "I understand," Ethan signed, though the words tasted bitter. Nathan wasn't protective. He was dismissive. He'd looked at Ethan and seen nothing worth protecting his wife from. Just another street kid trying to work an angle. "Do you have time to talk?" Victoria asked. "There's a coffee shop around the corner. I'd like to buy you lunch if you'll let me." Ethan felt his throat tighten. The offer was simple enough, but it carried weight. Real interest, real concern. It was the kind of attention he'd been starved for since Marcus had thrown him out. "I'd like that," he signed. "Thank you." Victoria smiled and gestured for him to follow. They walked in comfortable silence, Victoria occasionally glancing at him with that same intense observation he'd noticed during their first meeting. Ethan kept his hands in his pockets, acutely aware of how he must look next to her, shabby and unwashed, a stray dog following home a well-groomed owner. The coffee shop was a small place tucked between two larger businesses, the kind of establishment that catered to locals rather than tourists. It was warm inside, almost overwhelmingly so after days in the November cold. The smell of fresh coffee and baking bread made Ethan's stomach clench with hunger he hadn't fully acknowledged. They took a booth near the back, away from the windows. Victoria ordered for both of them, soup, sandwiches, coffee, and then turned her full attention to Ethan. "I've been thinking about you since we met," she signed. "A 16-year-old shouldn't be living on the streets. There must be resources, shelters." "I've tried the shelters," Ethan interrupted, his hands moving quickly. "They're dangerous. Theft, violence. I'm safer on my own." Victoria's face fell. "Surely not all of them. Enough of them." Ethan softened his expression, not wanting to sound harsh. "I appreciate the concern, really, but I've learned to survive. I'm careful." "What about family? Is there no one who can help you?" The question landed like a punch. Ethan felt his chest constrict, memories flooding back. Marcus's face twisted with rage, the sound of the door slamming behind him as he was thrown out into the night. The cold realization that he was completely alone. "No family," he signed, keeping his movements controlled despite the emotion roiling inside him. "Not anymore." Their food arrived, interrupting the conversation. Ethan tried not to attack the sandwich like a starving animal, but it was difficult. The bread was fresh, the turkey was real meat rather than processed slices, and there were actual vegetables. Lettuce, tomato, avocado. He hadn't eaten anything this good in months. Victoria watched him eat with an expression that mixed sympathy with something else. Calculation, perhaps, or careful consideration. When he'd finished half the sandwich and some of the soup, she signed again. "Tell me about your mother. You said she taught you sign language." Ethan set down his spoon carefully, buying time to construct an answer that was true enough to be believable but vague enough to keep him safe. "Her name was Sarah. She lost her hearing in her 20s. An accident. She learned ASL and taught me from when I was very young. It was our special language, something just between us." "That's beautiful," Victoria signed, her expression soft. "She must have been remarkable. What happened to her?" "Cancer," Ethan signed, which was true. It was fast. 3 months from diagnosis to. He let his hands fall, unable to finish the sentence. Victoria reached across the table and placed her hand over his, a gesture of comfort that made Ethan's eyes burn with unexpected tears. He blinked them back, refusing to break down in this coffee shop, in front of this woman who represented everything he'd lost and might never get back. "I'm so sorry," Victoria signed when she withdrew her hand. "And after she died, there was no one else? No other family?" Ethan shook his head. "Just her and me. Always." It wasn't entirely a lie. Marcus had never been family, not really. He'd been a warden, a captor, someone who'd stolen Ethan's life for his own purposes. The man who'd raised him had done so out of greed and convenience, not love. "What about your father?" Victoria asked gently. "Did you know him?" The question hit harder than Ethan expected. He looked down at his soup, watching the steam rise in delicate spirals, and considered how to answer. The truth was impossible. That his father was Nathan Ashford, that he was sitting here talking to his father's wife, that everything about the situation was built on lies 16 years old. "I never knew him," Ethan signed slowly. "He left before I was born. My mother never talked about him much." Victoria's expression became pensive. She seemed to be thinking about something, weighing options in her mind. Finally, she signed again. "Ethan, I want to help you. I don't mean just money. I mean real help. Getting you off the streets, into a safe place, maybe back in school." "Why?" Ethan signed before he could stop himself. "You don't know me. Why would you care?" Victoria smiled, but there was sadness in it. "Because I know what it's like to feel alone, to feel like the world has forgotten you exist." She paused, then continued. "Being deaf in a hearing world, you become invisible. People look through you, talk around you, make decisions about you without including you. I see that same invisibility in you, Ethan, and I don't want to be another person who just walks past." The words cut through Ethan's defenses like nothing else could have. He felt tears threatening again and fought them back, his throat tight with emotion. "I don't know what to say," he signed honestly. "Say you'll let me help," Victoria responded. "Let me talk to some people, see what resources are available. There are programs for homeless youth, emancipated minors. We can find something." Ethan wanted to say yes. God, he wanted to say yes so badly it physically hurt. But accepting help meant exposure, meant questions he couldn't answer, background checks that might lead back to Marcus. It meant risk, but it also meant opportunity, a chance to get closer to Nathan, to the truth, to some kind of justice for what had been stolen from him. "I'll think about it," he signed finally. Can I see you again? To talk more about this?" Victoria's smile was radiant. "Of course, how about we meet here? Same time, 3 days from now." "I'll be here," Ethan signed. They finished their meal in more comfortable conversation. Victoria told him about her work with deaf advocacy groups, about the challenges of navigating a hearing world, about her passion for making sure deaf children had access to education and resources. Ethan found himself genuinely engaged, asking questions, sharing observations from his own childhood with Sarah. It was the first real conversation he'd had in 2 years. The first time he'd felt like a person rather than an obstacle or a problem. When they finally left the coffee shop, the afternoon sun was already beginning its descent toward the horizon. Victoria pressed more money into his hand, another $100 along with her business card. "If you need anything before we meet again, call that number. It's my assistant's line, but she can reach me." Victoria paused, then added, "And Ethan, please be careful out here. The world can be cruel to people like us." "People like us?" Ethan signed. "The invisible ones," Victoria signed back, "the ones everyone else forgets to see." She squeezed his hand once more and then walked back to where her Mercedes waited. Ethan watched her go, the business card feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds in his pocket. He stood on the corner for a long time after she'd driven away, watching the city move around him. Somewhere out there, Marcus Vance was living in luxury built on stolen ideas and stolen lives. Somewhere out there, Nathan Ashford was running his empire, completely unaware that his son was alive. And here was Ethan, caught between truth and survival, holding a business card that might be his only chance at either. The sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Ethan finally turned and headed toward the subway, toward another night of careful survival, in a city that had taught him to expect nothing and trust no one. But for the first time in 2 years, he felt something dangerous blooming in his chest. Hope. Nathan Ashford stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office on the 42nd floor, looking out over Manhattan as the city transitioned from day to night. Below him, millions of lives played out in miniature. Cars crawling through traffic, pedestrians rushing toward subway stations, the endless pulse of commerce and ambition that made New York the center of the world. But his mind wasn't on the city. It was on Victoria and on the homeless boy she couldn't stop talking about. "His name is Ethan," she'd said over dinner the previous night, her hands moving with animated enthusiasm as she signed. "Nathan, he's 16 years old and he's living on the streets. He's bright, educated. You can tell by the way he communicates. Something terrible must have happened to him." Nathan had nodded, made appropriate sounds of concern, but internally he'd felt nothing but frustration. Victoria had always had a soft heart for strays, abandoned animals, struggling artists, homeless youth. It was one of the things he'd loved about her when they first met, that genuine compassion that seemed so rare among their social circle. But it also made her vulnerable, easily manipulated by people who saw her wealth and her disability as opportunities. "I want to help him," Victoria had continued. "Really help him, not just give him money. I'm thinking about setting up a meeting with social services, maybe finding him a placement program." "Victoria," Nathan had interrupted gently, reaching across the table to take her hand. "You have a good heart, but you need to be careful. This boy, Ethan, you don't know anything about him. His story could be completely fabricated." Victoria's expression had hardened in that stubborn way he'd come to recognize over their 15 years of marriage. "I know he's 16 and alone. I know he learned sign language from his deaf mother who died. I know he's not asking me for anything. I offered to help." "Which makes him smart," Nathan had countered. The best con artists never ask directly. They let the mark come to them. The conversation had ended there, Victoria withdrawing into hurt silence, while Nathan cursed himself for his bluntness. He hadn't meant to suggest she was stupid or naive. He was just trying to protect her the way he always had. Now, alone in his office with the city spread out below him, Nathan pulled out his phone and made a call. "Reynolds?" A gruff voice answered on the second ring. "James, it's Nathan Ashford. I need you to look into someone for me." James Reynolds was a private investigator Nathan had used for years. Corporate espionage, background checks on potential business partners, the occasional delicate personal matter. He was discreet, thorough, and expensive. Exactly what Nathan needed. "Name?" Reynolds asked. "Ethan Rivers. Male, 16 years old, currently homeless in Manhattan. Frequents the area around 5th Avenue and 57th Street. That's all I have." There was a pause. "That's not much to go on. It's what I've got. My wife has taken an interest in this kid, wants to help him. I need to know if he's legitimate or if he's running some kind of angle. Homeless teen, wealthy benefactor. Yeah, I've seen this before. Could be legit, could be a scam. Give me a week, I'll dig up what I can find. Make it 3 days," Nathan said. "And James? Keep this quiet. I don't want my wife knowing I'm looking into him." "Understood, I'll be in touch." Nathan ended the call and returned his attention to the window. The lights of the city were coming on now, thousands of them, each one representing a life, a story, a set of circumstances he would never fully understand. Somewhere out there, Ethan Rivers was settling in for another night on the streets, if that was even his real name, if any of his story was true. Nathan told himself he was being prudent, protective, but there was something else gnawing at him, something he couldn't quite identify. When he'd seen Victoria talking to that boy, signing with him in that silent language Nathan had never fully learned despite years of marriage, he'd felt something unexpected. Jealousy. Not romantic jealousy. Nothing so simple. It was the jealousy of exclusion, of watching his wife connect with a complete stranger in a way she'd never quite connected with him. Despite his best efforts, despite the interpreters and the technology and the genuine love he felt for Victoria, there was always a barrier between them, a gap he couldn't quite bridge, and this homeless kid had crossed it in minutes. Nathan shook his head, dismissing the thought as petty. He had more important things to worry about. The quarterly board meeting next week, the new product launch, the ongoing patent dispute with Vance Industries. Marcus Vance. Now there was a name that still made Nathan's blood boil, even after all these years. They'd been partners once, best friends, closer than brothers. Together they'd built the foundation of what became Ashford Technologies, working 70-hour weeks, surviving on pizza and ambition. Marcus had been the engineer, the technical genius who could see solutions no one else could imagine. Nathan had been the businessman, the one who could take those brilliant ideas and turn them into products, into profit. And then Marcus had betrayed him. The details still burned in Nathan's memory. The patents filed in Marcus's name alone, the technology stolen from their shared servers. The new company launched 6 months before Nathan even knew what was happening. Vance Industries had built an empire on ideas that rightfully belonged to Nathan, and by the time Nathan's lawyers proved it, Marcus had made enough money to settle out of court and still walk away a wealthy man. They hadn't spoken in 16 years. Nathan had tried to bury Marcus professionally, had used every legal and business maneuver available to destroy Vance Industries, but Marcus was like a cockroach, impossible to kill, thriving in the shadows while Nathan worked in the light. Nathan's phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "Having tea with the board from the Deaf Community Center. Don't wait up, love you." He texted back a heart emoji, one of the few concessions he'd made to modern communication, and checked the time. 7:30. He should go home, but the penthouse would be empty without Victoria, echoing with the silence of unused space. Instead, he turned back to his computer and pulled up the security footage from their building. He scrolled back 3 days to the afternoon Victoria had first met Ethan Rivers and watched the encounter play out on the grainy recording. The camera angle wasn't great, but he could see them clearly enough. Victoria animated and engaged, the boy responding with what appeared to be genuine emotion. Nathan paused the footage, zooming in on the boy's face. There was something there, something in the shape of his jaw, the set of his eyes. It nagged at Nathan, a familiarity he couldn't place. He'd seen thousands of faces in his life, business meetings, charity galas, random encounters on the street. This boy could be anyone, but the feeling persisted. Nathan closed the video file and opened a new browser window. He typed Ethan Rivers, New York into the search engine, knowing it was futile but unable to stop himself. As expected, nothing useful came up. The name was too common, and a homeless teenager wouldn't have much of a digital footprint. He tried Ethan Rivers' Homeless Manhattan and got links to various shelters and advocacy groups, but nothing specific. He was about to close the browser when a thought struck him. If this kid knew sign language, if he'd learned it from his deaf mother, there might be records. Deaf community organizations, schools, advocacy groups, they kept databases, directories of families. It was a long shot, but Nathan had succeeded in business by following long shots. He spent the next hour making calls, pulling strings, using his name and his money to open doors that would normally remain closed. Most of the organizations he contacted were helpful but ultimately useless. Privacy laws prevented them from sharing information about members or clients, even deceased ones. But on his 8th call, to a woman named Dr. Ellen Reese, who ran a deaf education program in Brooklyn, he hit something. Sarah Rivers, Dr. Reese said thoughtfully. Yes, I remember her. She was involved with our adult education program about 16 years ago, took some classes in advanced ASL, helped develop curriculum for parents of deaf children. Lovely woman. Nathan's pulse quickened. Did she have a son? Ethan? I'm not sure I should be discussing this, Mr. Ashford. Privacy concerns. Dr. Reese, I'm not asking for anything confidential. I'm trying to help this young man. My wife has taken an interest in his welfare, and I'm simply trying to verify his story before we get too involved. Surely you can understand the need for caution. There was a long pause. I suppose there's no harm in confirming what you already seem to know. Yes, Sarah had a son. I met him a few times when she brought him to our facility. Smart kid, very protective of his mother. This would have been, God, 13, 14 years ago. I heard Sarah passed away a few years back. Cancer, I believe. And the son? Ethan? I don't know what happened to him after Sarah died. I assumed he went to family, but I never followed up. We lose touch with people, Mr. Ashford. It happens. Nathan thanked her and ended the call, his mind racing. So the story was at least partially true. There was a Sarah Rivers, she was deaf, she had a son named Ethan, and she died of cancer. That didn't mean the boy Victoria met was the same Ethan, but it made it more likely. It also didn't explain what had happened to drive a kid from a stable home, stable enough that his mother was involved in community education programs, onto the streets. Nathan made one more call, this time to Reynolds. I've got more information for you, Nathan said when the investigator answered. The mother's name was Sarah Rivers, deaf, died of cancer approximately 2 years ago. She was involved with deaf education programs in Brooklyn. Start there. That's helpful. I'll dig into it. But Ashford, I gotta ask, why the urgency on this? Is your wife in danger? No, Nathan said, though he wasn't entirely sure. I just need to know who this kid really is. Call it intuition. After he hung up, Nathan sat in the darkness of his office, the city lights providing the only illumination. Somewhere out there, Ethan Rivers was surviving another night on the streets. And somewhere in Nathan's mind, a piece of a puzzle he didn't even know existed was trying to fall into place. The familiarity he'd felt looking at the boy's face. The timeline. Sarah Rivers active in the deaf community 16 years ago. Her son roughly the same age now. The uncomfortable fact that Marcus Vance's betrayal had also occurred 16 years ago. That entire period of Nathan's life marked by loss and deception. Nathan shook his head. He was connecting dots that didn't exist, seeing patterns where there was only random chance. The stress of the upcoming board meeting was getting to him, making him paranoid. But still, that face, those eyes. Nathan pulled up the security footage again, pausing on the clearest shot of Ethan Rivers. He stared at it for a long time, trying to identify what his subconscious kept insisting was important. And then, like a punch to the gut, he saw it. The boy's eyes. The exact shade of hazel that Nathan saw in his own mirror every morning. The slightly crooked set of his left ear. A family trait Nathan's father had shared, that Nathan had always hated about his own appearance. The way the boy held himself, shoulders back despite obvious hunger and hardship. The same stubborn pride Nathan recognized from his own youth. It was impossible. It had to be impossible. But Nathan's hands were shaking as he picked up his phone and called Reynolds again. I need you to do something else, Nathan said, his voice tight. I need you to find out everything, and I mean everything, about Marcus Vance's activities 16 years ago. Personal life, business dealings, travel records, everything. Vance? What does he have to do with a homeless kid? I don't know, Nathan said. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. Just do it, James, and do it fast. He ended the call and sat back in his chair, his heart pounding. He was being ridiculous, paranoid. The stress and the late hours were making him see connections that didn't exist, but deep in his gut, in that place where instinct lived, Nathan Ashford knew something was very, very wrong. And it all centered on a 16-year-old boy named Ethan Rivers. Ethan knew he was being followed. He'd spotted the man 2 days ago. Middle-aged, unremarkable features. The kind of face that blended into crowds. But Ethan had spent 2 years learning to read the streets, to identify the patterns that meant danger. This man appeared too often in too many places, always at a careful distance, always watching. A private investigator. It had to be, which meant Nathan was digging into his background, which meant Ethan's time was running out. He sat now in a 24-hour diner in Hell's Kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee he'd made last 2 hours, watching the door through the reflection in the window. It was 3 a.m, that dead time when even New York slowed to a crawl. The only other customers were a drunk couple arguing in hushed voices and a taxi driver reading a newspaper. Ethan's backpack sat on the seat beside him, containing everything he owned in the world. A change of clothes, a water bottle, a battered paperback he'd found in a subway station, and a manila envelope he'd carried for 2 years. The envelope contained documents he'd stolen from Marcus Vance's home office the night before he'd been thrown out. Birth certificates, adoption papers, patent filings, and letters that told a story of theft and deception going back 16 years. It was his insurance policy, his proof, and his curse. And he couldn't use it without exposing himself to Marcus's wrath, but he couldn't destroy it either. So he carried it everywhere, a paper anchor keeping him tethered to a past he couldn't escape and a future he couldn't reach. His phone, a cheap prepaid model he'd bought with some of Victoria's money, buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Central Park, Bethesda Fountain, come alone. N.A." Ethan's blood ran cold. Nathan Ashford. Somehow Nathan had gotten his number, probably from Victoria, though Ethan had been careful never to give it to her, which meant Nathan had access to Victoria's phone, her messages, her contacts, which meant Nathan knew more than he was supposed to. Ethan's first instinct was to run, disappear into the city's endless maze of streets and shelters, become someone else, start over somewhere Nathan Ashford's influence didn't reach. He could be on a bus to Philadelphia by dawn, in Chicago by tomorrow night. But running meant abandoning the only chance he'd ever have at justice. It meant letting Marcus Vance win, letting his mother's death mean nothing, letting his own stolen life remain just another unsolved mystery. And it meant never seeing Victoria again. That last thought surprised him with its intensity. In the few conversations they'd shared, Victoria had given him something he hadn't felt in 2 years, the sense of being seen, of mattering to someone. It was dangerous to care, to let himself want things he couldn't have, but the feeling was there nonetheless. Ethan typed back, "I'll be there." He deleted the message thread immediately after sending it, a habit born of paranoia, and pocketed the phone. Through the window he could see the sky beginning to lighten, that pre-dawn gray that meant another night survived, another day to navigate. The investigator was out there somewhere, probably in a car parked down the street waiting to see where Ethan went next. Let him watch. Let him report back to Nathan that Ethan was just a homeless kid trying to survive. Nothing special, nothing threatening. Ethan paid for his coffee with crumpled bills and stepped out into the November cold. The wind had teeth this morning, cutting through his jacket like it wasn't there. He needed to find somewhere warm to spend the next few hours, somewhere he could think through his approach to the meeting with Nathan. The public library opened at 10. That gave him 7 hours to kill. Central Park at 2 in the afternoon was a study in contrasts. Joggers in expensive athletic wear, passing homeless people sleeping on benches, tourists snapping photos while locals rushed past on their way to somewhere more important. Ethan arrived 15 minutes early and positioned himself where he could watch the Bethesda fountain from a distance. Nathan was already there. He stood by the fountain's edge, wearing a long black coat that probably cost more than Ethan had seen in 6 months. He was alone, scanning the crowd with the kind of controlled intensity that suggested he was used to being in charge. Even from a distance, Ethan could see the tension in his father's shoulders, the way his jaw was set with determination. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. This was it, the moment he'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. He checked his backpack one more time, making sure the manila envelope was secure, and then started walking toward the fountain. Nathan spotted him immediately. Their eyes met across the distance, and Ethan saw something flicker in his father's expression. Recognition, maybe, or surprise. Nathan's hand moved unconsciously to his coat pocket, a gesture that spoke of nervousness, of uncertainty. "Ethan," Nathan said as he approached. His voice was controlled but not cold, carefully neutral. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Ashford," Ethan replied, stopping a few feet away. He kept his posture relaxed despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "Your text was pretty direct. Didn't feel like I had much choice." "You always have a choice," Nathan said. "I wanted to talk to you away from Victoria, away from distractions. I want the truth." "About what?" "About who you really are." Nathan's eyes bored into him. "I've been doing some research. Sarah Rivers was real. Deaf mother, involved in community programs, died of cancer 2 years ago. But I can't find any records of what happened to her son after her death. No foster care placements, no juvenile records, nothing. It's like Ethan Rivers just appeared on the streets fully formed." Ethan's mind raced. How much did Nathan actually know? How much was he guessing? Maybe your investigator isn't as good as you think. Or maybe you're not who you claim to be. Nathan took a step closer. "Here's what I find interesting, the timeline. Sarah Rivers was most active in the deaf community about 16 years ago, right around the time she would have been pregnant with you, if your age is accurate. And 16 years ago was also when—" He stopped abruptly, his expression shifting. Ethan could see the wheels turning in his father's mind. Connections being made. Impossible conclusions being drawn. "When what?" Ethan prompted, even though he knew exactly where Nathan's thoughts were going. "When my business partner betrayed me," Nathan finished quietly. "When Marcus Vance stole my technology and disappeared for 6 months before resurfacing with his own company." "When?" He trailed off again, staring at Ethan with an intensity that made Ethan want to look away. "When what?" Ethan repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Nathan's hand shook slightly as he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through photos, then turned the screen toward Ethan. It showed an old picture, a woman with dark hair and intelligent eyes, laughing at something off camera. "Do you know who this is?" Nathan asked. Ethan's breath caught. He knew that face. He'd seen it in his dreams for 2 years, in the few photographs he'd managed to steal before Marcus destroyed them all. "No," he lied, but his voice betrayed him. "Her name was Rachel Parker," Nathan said. "She was an engineer, one of the most brilliant people I ever worked with. She and Marcus Vance were partners on a project I funded, developing new battery technology. And then 16 years ago, she died. Car accident," they said. "Marcus handled all the arrangements, told me she had no family, that he'd take care of everything." Nathan's voice grew harder. "But I've been thinking about timelines, about coincidences. Rachel was deaf, Ethan. She'd lost her hearing in a lab accident years before." Ethan felt the world tilt beneath him. This was happening too fast, spiraling beyond his control. "She was also pregnant," Nathan continued, his eyes never leaving Ethan's face. "Marcus told me she'd miscarried, that the stress of the pregnancy and the project had been too much. He was devastated, or so he seemed. And I believed him because Marcus was my best friend, because I had no reason to doubt him." "Why are you telling me this?" Ethan managed. "Because I did a DNA test," Nathan said simply. He pulled a small plastic bag from his pocket. Ethan recognized it immediately as an evidence bag, the kind used for lab samples. "You left a coffee cup at that diner 3 days ago. My investigator retrieved it. I had it tested against my own DNA." The world seemed to stop. Ethan couldn't breathe, couldn't think. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. He was supposed to be in control, supposed to reveal the truth on his own terms. "The results came back this morning," Nathan said, and his voice was shaking now, all pretense of control abandoned. "You're my son, Ethan. Rachel Parker was your mother, and somehow, impossibly, you're alive." Ethan felt tears burning in his eyes. He'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, rehearsed what he would say, how he would feel, but none of his imaginings had prepared him for the reality, for the raw emotion in Nathan's voice, for the way his father was looking at him like he was seeing a ghost. "How?" Nathan whispered. "How is this possible?" "Marcus said, he told me." "Marcus lied," Ethan said, and suddenly the words were pouring out, 2 years of silence breaking like a dam, about everything. "Rachel didn't die in a car accident. She died of cancer 2 years ago, but by then she'd been raising me as Sarah Rivers, hiding from Marcus, hiding from you. She told me everything before she died. How Marcus stole me from the hospital, how he faked documents saying she'd abandoned me, how he threatened to kill both of us if she ever came forward. Nathan stumbled backward, his face draining of color. No, that's not. Marcus wouldn't. He did. Ethan pulled the manila envelope from his backpack with shaking hands. I have proof. Birth certificates, adoption papers with forged signatures, patents filed in Marcus's name that have Rachel's handwriting in the development notes. He stole everything. Your technology, your son, your partner's life. He built Vance Industries on theft and lies. Nathan took the envelope with numb fingers, opening it slowly. Ethan watched as his father's face transformed, shock giving way to horror, horror giving way to rage. The documents told their story clearly. Baby boy Parker Ashford, born at Mount Sinai Hospital. Adoption papers dated 3 months later, signed by a Sarah Rivers whose signature didn't match any of Rachel's actual writing. Patent applications with notes in Rachel's distinctive hand, filed under Marcus's name 6 months after her supposed death. He kept her alive? Nathan asked, his voice hoarse. As leverage, Ethan explained. She couldn't come forward without risking my life, so she changed her name, moved to Brooklyn, raised me alone. She taught me sign language because it was the only piece of herself she could keep, and she told me the truth gradually, piece by piece, so that when she died I'd know who I really was. Why didn't you come to me immediately? Why the streets, the deception? Because Marcus found out I knew, Ethan said bitterly. I was 14 when my mother died. I went to Marcus because I thought he was my father, because that's what all the legal documents said. But I found her real documents hidden in our apartment. Letters she'd written but never sent, photographs, evidence. I confronted Marcus and he threw me out. Told me if I ever revealed the truth, he'd destroy whatever life I tried to build. Said he had resources, connections, that no one would believe a homeless kid over a billionaire. Nathan's hands clenched around the documents, crumpling them. I'll kill him, he said quietly. I'll destroy him. He's already destroyed, Ethan said. He built everything on sand. Those patents, half of them were Rachel's work. Vance Industries exists because he stole from both of you. But you can't just destroy him, not without proof that will hold up in court. That's why I've been waiting, watching, trying to figure out how to expose him without getting crushed in the process. Nathan looked up from the documents, really seeing Ethan, not as a homeless kid or a potential threat, but as his son. You're 16 years old, he said wonderingly. You should be in school worrying about homework and friends and... His voice broke. God, what has he done to you? What have I let happen to you? You didn't know, Ethan said, though the words felt inadequate. How could you have known? They stood there in the cold November afternoon, father and son meeting for the first time in 16 years, surrounded by strangers who had no idea they were witnessing a family reunion built on theft, lies, and survival. Victoria, Nathan said suddenly. She knows sign language. She connected with you because I learned it from my mother, Ethan finished. Rachel, yeah, we have to tell her. She has a right to know. Tell her what? Ethan challenged. That you have a secret son? That I've been lying to her? That everything about me is complicated and messy and dangerous? That you're family, Nathan said firmly. That you're coming home. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. Home. He'd been homeless for so long the concept had become abstract, meaningless. But hearing Nathan say it, seeing the determination in his father's eyes made something crack open in Ethan's chest. Marcus will fight back, Ethan warned. He won't just let this happen. He spent 16 years building his empire, protecting his lies. He'll do whatever it takes to silence us. Let him try, Nathan said. And now his voice carried the steel that had built Ashford Technologies into a billion-dollar company. I've been waiting 16 years to destroy Marcus Vance. I just didn't know why it mattered so much. He reached out tentatively, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. You matter. You're what matters. And I'm not losing you again. Ethan felt tears spill down his cheeks, hot against his frozen skin. He'd been so focused on revenge, on justice, on simply surviving, that he'd forgotten what it felt like to be someone's priority. What do we do now? He asked. Nathan's expression hardened with purpose. Now we go to war. The Ashford penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a building overlooking Central Park. Ethan stood in the marble-floored foyer, feeling desperately out of place in his threadbare clothes and scuffed sneakers. Everything around him screamed wealth. The crystal chandelier overhead, the original artwork on the walls, the panoramic windows that turned the city into a living painting. Nathan had brought him here directly from the park, calling ahead to warn Victoria they were coming and that they needed to talk. The car ride had been tense, filled with stilted attempts at conversation that felt artificial after the raw emotion of their confrontation at the fountain. "She's in the living room," Nathan said, his hand hovering uncertainly near Ethan's back as if he wanted to offer comfort but didn't know how. "Ethan, I haven't told her anything yet. I think we should do this together." Ethan nodded mutely, his throat too tight for words. He'd spent 2 years imagining scenarios like this, but none of his imaginings had included Victoria. She was an unexpected variable, a complication he hadn't planned for. They found her standing by the windows, backlit by the afternoon sun. She turned as they entered, her face lighting up when she saw Ethan before shifting to confusion as she registered the tension radiating from both of them. "Ethan," she signed, her hands moving quickly. "What's going on?" "Nathan, you said it was urgent." Nathan moved to stand beside her, and Ethan watched as his father took Victoria's hands gently. "Victoria, I need you to sit down. What I'm about to tell you it's going to change everything." Victoria's expression shifted to alarm, her eyes darting between Nathan and Ethan. She allowed Nathan to guide her to the sofa, and Ethan took a seat across from them, perched on the edge of an armchair that probably cost more than most people's cars. "I had Ethan investigated," Nathan began, and Victoria's face immediately hardened. Nathan raised a hand. I know. You're angry and you have every right to be. But Victoria, I found something. Something impossible." He pulled out his phone and showed her the DNA test results. Ethan watched as Victoria read, her expression shifting from anger to confusion to shocked disbelief. "I don't understand," she signed, her hands trembling slightly. "What is this saying?" "It's saying that Ethan is my son," Nathan said quietly. "My biological son, the son I never knew I had." Victoria's hands dropped to her lap. She stared at Nathan, then at Ethan, her mind clearly racing to make sense of the impossible. "But you told me you never had children." "I didn't know," Nathan said, and Ethan could hear the pain in his voice. 16 years ago, I was funding a research project. 2 engineers, brilliant people, Marcus Vance and Rachel Parker. Rachel was deaf like you. She was also pregnant with my child, though I didn't know it at the time. We'd had a brief relationship, very brief, and she never told me about the pregnancy. Ethan watched Victoria's face as Nathan spoke, saw the moment she made a connection. Her eyes widened, and her hands moved almost involuntarily. "Rachel Parker, the engineer who died in a car accident?" "She didn't die in a car accident," Nathan continued. "Marcus Vance staged her death, stole her baby, my baby, and raised him as his own son under a false identity. Rachel survived, went into hiding with a new name, Sarah Rivers. She raised Ethan alone, in fear, for 14 years until she really did die, of cancer." Victoria turned to Ethan, her expression a mixture of sympathy and horror. "Your mother, Sarah, she was Rachel Parker?" Ethan nodded, finding his voice. "She told me everything before she died. About Nathan, about Marcus, about how I was stolen. But she also told me that Marcus was dangerous, that he'd kill to protect his secrets. When she died, I went to Marcus because I thought he was my father. I found documents proving the truth, and when I confronted him, he threw me out. Threatened to destroy me if I ever told anyone. So you've been living on the streets for 2 years, Victoria signed slowly, knowing you were Nathan's son but unable to tell him. I didn't know how, Ethan admitted. Marcus Vance is powerful, connected. I'm nobody. Who would believe me? I needed proof. I needed a plan. He gestured helplessly at the opulent room around them. I needed to not be a homeless kid with a crazy story. Victoria stood abruptly and crossed to where Ethan sat. Before he could react, she pulled him into a tight embrace. Ethan stiffened, unused to physical affection after so long without it. But then something inside him broke and he found himself clinging to her, his face pressed against her shoulder as 2 years of loneliness and fear poured out of him. You poor child, Victoria sighed when she finally pulled back, tears streaming down her face. What you've endured, what you've survived. She turned to Nathan, her hands moving sharply. We're bringing him home. Right now. Today. He's family. Already planned on it, Nathan said. And Ethan could see his father struggling with his own emotions. But Victoria, there's more we need to discuss. Marcus Vance has built an empire on stolen technology, mine and Rachel's. He's committed fraud, possibly kidnapping, definitely identity theft. We need to expose him, but we need to do it carefully. If he feels threatened, There's no telling what he might do. Then we get lawyers, Victoria signed decisively. The best lawyers money can buy. We document everything, build an airtight case, and we destroy him. It's not that simple, Ethan interjected. Both Nathan and Victoria turned to him. Marcus isn't just powerful, he's paranoid. He's been covering his tracks for 16 years. He has resources, connections in law enforcement and government. If he gets wind that we're building a case against him, he'll run or he'll fight and people could get hurt. Then what do you suggest? Nathan asked. Ethan had been thinking about this for 2 years, turning it over in his mind during endless cold nights on the street. We need him to confess. Not just to stealing patents or committing fraud, but to everything, the kidnapping, the threats, Rachel's forced hiding. We need him on record, admitting what he did. How do we get that? Nathan asked. He's not going to just volunteer a confession. No, Ethan agreed, but he might if he thinks he's won. If he thinks he's eliminated the threat. Victoria's hands moved urgently. Absolutely not. Whatever you're thinking, if it puts you in danger. I'm already in danger. Ethan signed back. I have been for 2 years. At least this way, we can control the situation. Use it. Nathan was shaking his head. I'm not risking you, I just got you back. I'm not going to… You don't have a choice. Ethan interrupted, his voice harder than he intended. Marcus knows about me. He's known for 2 years. It's only a matter of time before he finds out I made contact with you. When that happens, he'll either try to silence me permanently or he'll disappear. This is our only window. The three of them sat in tense silence, the weight of impossible decisions pressing down on them. Outside the windows, the city continued its endless motion. Millions of lives intersecting and diverging, completely unaware of the drama playing out 42 floors above the street. Finally, Nathan spoke. What's your plan? Ethan leaned forward, pulling the manila envelope from his backpack. He spread the documents across the glass coffee table, birth certificates, patent applications, handwritten notes in Rachel's distinctive script. We make copies of everything, he said. Multiple copies, stored in different locations with instructions to release them if anything happens to any of us. Then I go to Marcus. I tell him I'm willing to make a deal. My silence in exchange for money, for a life. I play to his ego, make him think he's won, that he's bought me off. While wearing a wire, Nathan finished, understanding dawning in his eyes. While wearing a wire, Ethan confirmed. We get him talking about the past, about Rachel, about the theft. He thinks he's gloating to a kid he's already beaten, but really, he's confessing to everything. Victoria's hands moved sharply. And if he realizes what you're doing? If he gets violent? That's where you come in, Ethan said, looking at Nathan. You'll have people nearby listening. At the first sign of real danger, they move in. We'll do it in a public place, somewhere Marcus won't risk making a scene. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Ethan recognized from his own mirror, another reminder of their shared biology. It's risky. There are 1,000 ways this could go wrong, and one way it could go right, Ethan countered. This is what I've been working toward for 2 years. Let me finish it. They argued for another hour, Victoria insisting it was too dangerous, Nathan trying to find alternatives, Ethan pushing back against every objection. But gradually, reluctantly, Nathan began to see that Ethan was right. This was their best shot at bringing Marcus down without him escaping justice. We'll need time to set this up properly, Nathan finally said. Security team, recording equipment, legal counsel standing by. At least a week, maybe 2. 2 weeks, Ethan agreed. That gives us time to document everything, make copies, set up the fail-safes. And it gives me time to reach out to Marcus, plant the seed that I'm willing to deal. Victoria signed something rapidly, too fast for Ethan to catch. Nathan translated. She says you're staying here. No arguments. You're not spending another night on the street. Ethan felt that dangerous hope blooming in his chest again. I don't want to impose. You're not imposing, Nathan said firmly. You're coming home. That's non-negotiable. We have plenty of space, Victoria added, her hands moving gently now. You can have your own room, your own bathroom, clean clothes, regular meals, everything a 16-year-old should have. The words brought tears to Ethan's eyes again. He'd forgotten what it felt like to be cared for, to have someone worry about his basic needs. Thank you, he managed, his voice rough. Nathan stood and moved to a phone on the side table. I'm calling my lawyer. We're going to do this right. Document everything, build a case that can't be challenged, and Ethan? He paused, meeting his son's eyes. We're also starting the process of legally establishing your identity. You're Ethan Parker Ashford. It's time to make that official." As Nathan made his calls, Victoria sat beside Ethan on the sofa. "I want to show you something," she signed. She stood and gestured for him to follow. She led him through the penthouse to a wing Ethan hadn't seen yet. They stopped outside a closed door, and Victoria opened it to reveal a bedroom that was bigger than some apartments Ethan had seen. It had its own sitting area, a king-sized bed, and windows that looked out over Central Park. "This is the guest room," Victoria signed, "but we can redecorate it however you want. Make it yours. A space that belongs to you." Ethan walked into the room slowly, taking in the pristine furniture, the soft carpet under his feet, the bathroom he could see through an open doorway. It was too much, too overwhelming after 2 years of doorways and shelters and constant vigilance. "I don't know if I remember how to live like this," he signed honestly. Victoria's expression softened. "Then we'll help you remember, one day at a time." They stood there in comfortable silence for a moment before Victoria signed again. "Can I ask you something? About your mother? About Rachel?" Ethan nodded. "What was she like?" The question opened a floodgate of memories. "She was brilliant," Ethan said aloud, then switched to signing. "Even living in fear, even hiding from Marcus, she never stopped being curious about the world. She taught me to question everything, to look for solutions instead of accepting problems. She used to say that being deaf made her see the world differently, made her notice things hearing people missed." "She sounds remarkable," Victoria signed. "She was," Ethan agreed, "and she would have liked you. She always said the deaf community was full of the strongest people she'd ever met, people who refused to be defined by what they couldn't do." Victoria smiled, but there was sadness in it. "I wish I could have known her. I wish she hadn't had to live in fear." "Me too," Ethan signed. "But at least now we can make sure her story is told, that Marcus doesn't get to erase her existence." Nathan appeared in the doorway, his expression grave. "My lawyer is coming over tonight. He wants to hear everything, start building the case. But Ethan, he also wants to talk about the risks, about what could happen if this goes wrong." "I understand," Ethan said. "I've been living with those risks for 2 years. That doesn't make me feel better about it," Nathan said quietly. He crossed the room and awkwardly pulled Ethan into an embrace. It was stiff at first, both of them unused to physical affection, but then Nathan's arms tightened and Ethan found himself hugging back, feeling the solid reality of his father for the first time. "I won't let anything happen to you," Nathan murmured against his hair. "Not again. Never again." Ethan wanted to believe him. God, he wanted to believe that everything would work out, that Marcus would be brought to justice, that he could finally have the life that had been stolen from him. But he'd learned over 2 years on the street that believing in happy endings was dangerous. The world wasn't kind to people like him, and powerful men like Marcus Vance didn't go down without a fight. Still, standing in this room with his father's arms around him and Victoria watching with tears in her eyes, Ethan allowed himself to hope. Just a little, just enough to keep moving forward. Because the alternative, giving up, running away, letting Marcus win, was unthinkable. 2 weeks. That's all they had to prepare. 2 weeks to build a case, set a trap, and bring down a man who'd spent 16 years perfecting his lies. 2 weeks to reclaim a life that had been stolen before Ethan was old enough to remember having it. The war Nathan had promised in the park was about to begin, and this time, Ethan wouldn't be fighting alone. The restaurant Marcus Vance had chosen was predictably ostentatious. A private dining room at Per Se, one of Manhattan's most exclusive establishments, where a single meal cost more than most people earned in a week. Ethan sat across from the man who'd raised him, stolen him, and ultimately discarded him, and marveled at how much Marcus looked exactly the same. 52 years old but could pass for 40, with silver-streaked hair styled perfectly, wearing a suit that screamed bespoke tailoring. His face was handsome in a calculated way, the kind of looks that came from good genetics and better cosmetic work. But it was his eyes that Ethan had never forgotten, pale blue, cold, assessing everything and everyone for their utility. Those eyes were studying Ethan now with undisguised contempt. "You look terrible," Marcus said, his voice carrying that particular blend of disappointment and disgust that Ethan remembered so well. 2 years on the street hasn't been kind to you. 2 years you put me there," Ethan replied evenly. Under his shirt pressed against his chest, the recording device Nathan's security team had provided felt like it was burning through his skin. In his ear, invisible and sophisticated, a tiny receiver carried Nathan's voice. "Stay calm. We're right outside. You're doing great." Marcus waved a dismissive hand. I gave you a choice, keep your mouth shut and I'd set you up somewhere comfortable. You chose to be difficult, to threaten me with your pathetic little documents. So you got what you deserved. Those documents prove you kidnapped me, Ethan said. That you stole me from Nathan Ashford, faked my mother's death, and built your empire on technology you didn't create. Prove? Marcus laughed, the sound sharp and ugly. To whom? You're a homeless teenager with a story that sounds like a paranoid delusion. I'm Marcus Vance, founder of Vance Industries, worth $3 billion. Who do you think people will believe? This was it, the moment they'd planned for. Ethan leaned forward, infusing his voice with desperation he didn't have to fake. That's why I'm here. I don't want to fight you anymore, Marcus. I just want a life. Give me enough money to start over. Somewhere far from New York, somewhere I can disappear, and I'll give you every document I have, every piece of evidence. You'll never hear from me again. Marcus's expression shifted, suspicion warring with satisfaction. How much are we talking about? 2 million, Ethan said. The number had been Nathan's suggestion. Large enough to seem serious, but small enough that Marcus might actually consider it. $2 million to buy off a street rat who could come back anytime asking for more? Marcus shook his head. You must think I'm stupid. I think you're smart enough to know that for $2 million you eliminate a problem permanently, Ethan countered. I'm tired, Marcus. I'm tired of being cold, tired of being hungry, tired of running. I just want out. Marcus studied him for a long moment, those cold blue eyes searching for deception. Ethan forced himself to hold the gaze, to project nothing but exhaustion and defeat. The documents, Marcus said finally. How do I know you'll actually give them to me? How do I know you haven't made copies? Because I'm 16 and homeless, Ethan said bitterly. Where would I keep copies? What would I do with them? I've been carrying the originals in my backpack for 2 years because I had nowhere else to put them. You transfer the money to an account I set up. I hand over the envelope and we both walk away. In his ear, Nathan's voice. He's considering it. Keep pushing. You were always a clever kid, Marcus said slowly. Too clever for your own good. Rachel's genes, I suppose. She was brilliant too, right up until she became a liability. Ethan's hands clenched under the table. My mother spent 14 years hiding from you, living in fear. What kind of man does that to a woman who never hurt anyone? The kind of man who knows how to protect what's his, Marcus replied coldly. Rachel was going to tell Nathan about you, about the pregnancy. She was going to ruin everything I'd built. So I made her a deal. Disappear with the baby, stay quiet, and live. Try to contact Nathan, and I'd kill you both. Simple as that. You kept her prisoner for 14 years with threats, Ethan said, his voice shaking despite his attempt at control. I kept her alive, Marcus corrected. She could have come forward at any time. She chose not to because she loved you, because she knew I wasn't bluffing. That's on her, not me. The casual cruelty in Marcus's voice was staggering. In his ear, Ethan could hear Nathan's breathing, harsh and rapid. Easy. Stay focused. We need more. And Nathan? Ethan prompted. Your best friend, your business partner. You stole from him too. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a smile playing at his lips. Nathan Ashford is a businessman, not a creator. He had money and connections, but the real brilliance? That was me and Rachel. We did the work, made the breakthroughs. Why should Nathan profit from our genius? I simply took what I'd earned. You stole patents that had both your names on them, Ethan pressed. Technology you and Rachel developed together. Rachel was dead as far as the world knew, Marcus said with a shrug. Dead people don't hold patents. And Nathan was so busy mourning his tragic loss that he didn't even question the paperwork. It was almost too easy. Got it, Nathan's voice said in Ethan's ear. We have everything we need. Get out of there. But Ethan couldn't stop. 2 years of anger, of pain, of sleeping in doorways and eating from trash cans came boiling to the surface. You destroyed 3 lives for money. My mother, Nathan, me. You didn't care who you hurt as long as you got rich. Marcus's expression hardened. I made strategic decisions to protect my interests. That's what successful people do, Ethan. They identify obstacles and eliminate them. You, unfortunately, are one of those obstacles. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with threat. Ethan felt ice flood his veins. What does that mean? He asked carefully. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket, and for a heart-stopping moment, Ethan thought he was reaching for a weapon. Instead, Marcus pulled out his phone and placed it on the table. It means I knew you were wearing a wire the moment you walked in here, Marcus said calmly. Did you really think I wouldn't have this room swept for surveillance equipment? That I wouldn't be prepared for exactly this kind of amateur theatrics? The bottom dropped out of Ethan's world. In his ear, Nathan's voice turned urgent. "Ethan, get out, now! Security is coming in!" But Marcus was faster. He pressed a button on his phone, and the private dining room's door opened to reveal two large men in suits. Not restaurant security, private muscle, the kind with dead eyes and no questions. "Sit down, Ethan," Marcus said pleasantly. "We're not finished talking." Ethan bolted for the door, but one of the men caught him easily, thick arms wrapping around his chest. He struggled, tried to break free, but the grip was iron. "Let him go." Nathan's voice came not from the earpiece, but from the doorway. He burst into the room with three men in tactical gear behind him, and suddenly the small space was full of bodies and shouting. Marcus didn't even flinch. He stood slowly, his expression one of mild annoyance rather than alarm. "Nathan, how predictable, still playing the hero." "It's over, Marcus," Nathan said, his voice deadly calm despite the tension radiating from his body. "We have everything on tape. The kidnapping, the threats, the patent theft. You just confessed to 16 years of crimes." "Did I?" Marcus pulled a small device from his pocket, a signal jammer Ethan realized with sinking horror. "This room has been electronically sealed for the last 30 minutes. Your little recording equipment picked up nothing but static." Nathan's face went pale. The security team leader tapped his earpiece, his expression confirming Marcus's claim. "However," Marcus continued, "I have been recording, and what I have is footage of you breaking into a private dining room with armed men, assaulting my security, and attempting to extort me based on the delusional claims of a mentally unstable teenager." He gestured to cameras Ethan hadn't noticed, tiny and nearly invisible in the corners of the room. "You can't be serious," Nathan said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "I'm always serious about protecting myself," Marcus replied. "Now, here's what's going to happen. Ethan is going to give me those documents he's been carrying around. You're going to take your little militia and leave, and we're all going to forget this unfortunate incident happened." "And if we don't?" Nathan challenged. Marcus's smile was reptilian. "Then I release my recording to every media outlet in New York, file charges against you for assault and attempted extortion, and make it my life's mission to destroy Ashford Technologies. I have resources you can't imagine, Nathan. I've spent 16 years building a network that makes me untouchable. You really think one homeless kid's story is going to bring me down?" The man holding Ethan tightened his grip, making it hard to breathe. Ethan watched his father's face, saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. They'd lost. Despite all their planning, despite the recording equipment and the lawyers and the security team, Marcus had been 3 steps ahead. But then Nathan did something unexpected. He started laughing. "What's so funny?" Marcus demanded, his composure cracking slightly. "You," Nathan said. "You think you've thought of everything, but you made one critical mistake. And what's that? You assumed we'd try to take you down legally." Nathan pulled out his own phone. "But I didn't get where I am by playing fair. I got here by being smarter than my competitors and more ruthless than my enemies." He turned the phone toward Marcus. On the screen was a live stream, not of this room but of a press conference. Victoria sat at a table flanked by lawyers, and behind her on a massive screen were blown-up images of the documents from Ethan's envelope. 15 minutes ago, Nathan said, my wife started streaming a press conference. She's showing the world every piece of evidence Ethan collected, birth certificates, patent applications, Rachel's notes. She's telling Rachel Parker's story, explaining how you faked her death and kidnapped her son, how you built Vance Industries on stolen technology. Marcus's face went ashen. "You can't, that's defamation, slander." Nathan shook his head. "It's all documented, Marcus. Every claim is backed up by evidence that we've already submitted to the FBI. While you were busy jamming our recording equipment and gloating about your surveillance, we were exposing you to 50,000 people watching live, with that number growing every second." Ethan watched the scene unfold with stunned disbelief. This hadn't been part of the plan they'd discussed. Nathan had gone rogue, had prepared a backup that he hadn't even told Ethan about. Marcus lunged for Nathan's phone, but the security team was faster. They restrained him, and the 2 men holding Ethan suddenly looked uncertain, their grips loosening. "Let my son go," Nathan said quietly, and there was such authority in his voice that they obeyed immediately. Ethan stumbled forward, and Nathan caught him, pulling him close. "I'm sorry," Nathan whispered. "I couldn't risk telling you about the press conference. If Marcus suspected you knew, he might have called this meeting off entirely." "You used me as bait," Ethan said, but there was no heat in it, just exhaustion and relief. "I used us both as bait," Nathan corrected. "I knew Marcus would try something like this. He's too arrogant not to. So I made sure Victoria had everything she needed to expose him regardless of what happened in this room." The restaurant's actual security arrived then, along with NYPD officers who'd been waiting nearby. As they took Marcus into custody, his perfect composure finally shattered. "This isn't over," he shouted as they led him away. "I have lawyers. I have connections. I'll fight this." "You'll lose," Nathan called after him. "You stole my technology, my partner, and my son. There's no coming back from this." Marcus was still shouting as they dragged him through the restaurant, causing a scene that would be plastered across every news outlet by morning. Ethan watched him go, this man who'd shaped so much of his life through lies and cruelty, and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just numbness. "Come on," Nathan said gently. "Let's go home." They left through the restaurant's service entrance to avoid the media circus already forming out front. The car waiting for them was armored. Nathan had thought of everything, Ethan realized. The security team rode in a separate vehicle, flanking them. Nathan's phone rang continuously. Lawyers, business partners, media outlets all clamoring for comments. He silenced it and turned to Ethan. "How are you doing?" he asked. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "I thought I'd feel different when it finally happened. Victorious or something. But I just feel tired." "That's normal," Nathan said. "You've been carrying this weight for 2 years. It'll take time to feel like yourself again." "I don't even know who that is anymore," Ethan said quietly. "Who I'm supposed to be without Marcus's lies defining me." Nathan was quiet for a moment. "Then we'll figure it out together. You don't have to have all the answers right now." They arrived at the penthouse to find Victoria waiting in the foyer, her face streaked with tears. She pulled Ethan into a fierce embrace, signing rapidly when she finally released him. "You're safe. Thank God you're safe. I was so worried." "I'm okay," Ethan signed back. "Thanks to you. Nathan told me what you did." Victoria's expression turned fierce. "That man took 16 years from all of us. I wanted the world to know what he is." The three of them moved to the living room, where the press conference was still playing on multiple screens. Ethan watched as Victoria on the screen methodically laid out the case against Marcus Vance, her interpreter's voice calm and measured as she detailed years of fraud, theft, and intimidation. "The FBI seized Vance Industries' servers about 10 minutes ago," Nathan said, checking his phone. "They're already finding evidence, emails, financial records, everything Marcus thought he'd hidden. It's over, really over." Ethan sank onto the sofa, the adrenaline finally wearing off and leaving him shaking. Nathan sat beside him and Victoria took his other side, and for a long moment they just sat there together in silence. "What happens now?" Ethan finally asked. "Now we rebuild," Nathan said. "First, we establish your legal identity, Ethan Parker Ashford. Then we get you back in school, help you catch up on everything you missed. Whatever you want to do, wherever you want to go, it's yours. And Marcus goes to prison," Nathan said flatly, "for a very long time. My lawyers are confident about that." Ethan closed his eyes, trying to process it all. 2 years of surviving, of planning, of hoping for this exact outcome. And now that it was here, he felt unmoored, like he'd been running for so long that he didn't know how to stop. "It's okay to not be okay," Victoria signed, her hands moving in his field of vision. "You've been through trauma that most people can't even imagine. Give yourself time to heal." "I don't know how," Ethan admitted. "Then we'll learn together," Victoria signed. "One day at a time." Nathan's phone buzzed with a text. He read it and smiled. "The press conference has been viewed over 2 million times in the last hour. Marcus's board of directors just called an emergency meeting. Vance Industries' stock is in free fall. He's being dismantled piece by piece." It should have felt like victory, but Ethan just felt hollow. As if sensing his thoughts, Nathan put an arm around his shoulders. "You know what Rachel would say if she were here?" Ethan looked at his father. Still strange to think of him that way, but getting easier. "What?" "She'd say that survival is its own kind of victory, that you've already won by making it this far. Everything else is just cleanup." Tears burned in Ethan's eyes. "I miss her. God, I miss her so much." "I know," Nathan said softly. "I wish I'd known her better. I wish I'd known about you. But we're here now and we have time. All the time in the world to build something new." The three of them sat together as the city darkened outside the windows, watching the news coverage roll in. Marcus Vance's face was on every channel. His arrest, his crimes, his fall from grace playing out in real time for millions to see. 16 years of lies, unraveling in a single night. Ethan thought about his mother, about all the years she'd spent hiding, afraid to claim her own identity. He thought about the cold nights, the hunger, the constant fear that had defined his last 2 years. And he thought about the future, uncertain, terrifying, but finally his to shape. "Thank you," he said quietly to both Nathan and Victoria, "for believing me, for fighting for me. Your family," Victoria signed simply. "That's what family does. Family." The word felt foreign on Ethan's tongue, like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. But sitting here between Nathan and Victoria, safe and warm for the first time in 2 years, he thought maybe, just maybe, he could learn it again. Outside, the city continued its endless motion, but inside the Ashford penthouse, something had shifted. A stolen life had been reclaimed. A family, torn apart by lies and greed, had found its way back together. It wasn't a perfect ending. There would be legal battles ahead, therapy sessions, difficult conversations about the past, and uncertain negotiations about the future. Ethan's scars, physical and emotional, wouldn't heal overnight. But for the first time since his mother's death, Ethan Parker Ashford felt like he could breathe. Like maybe, despite everything, there was hope for something better. And that was enough. For now, that was more than enough. 6 months later, Ethan stood in front of his new school, a prestigious prep academy that Nathan had enrolled him in after months of intensive tutoring to catch him up. He wore clothes that fit properly, carried a backpack full of new supplies instead of survival necessities, and had a phone in his pocket programmed with his father's number. Marcus Vance was awaiting trial on multiple charges. Vance Industries had filed for bankruptcy after a mass exodus of employees and investors. The technology patents he'd stolen had been returned to their rightful owners, some to Nathan, others to Rachel Parker's estate, which Ethan had inherited. Ethan still had nightmares sometimes, still flinched at unexpected touches, still felt that old fear rise up when he saw police officers or men in expensive suits. But he also had therapy appointments twice a week, had Victoria teaching him new signs, and Nathan teaching him about business, had a room that was his, a life that was his, a future that was his to build. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And after 2 years of living in lies and shadows, real was all Ethan needed. He took a deep breath, adjusted his backpack, and walked through the school's front doors, into his reclaimed life, into his future, into the identity that had always been his. Finally acknowledged by the world, Ethan Parker Ashford, son, survivor, student, and finally home.